I've spent a lot of time in the last couple of years writing about things that most Canadians will be familiar with, the idea that China's a country that is willing to take people prisoner in the midst of international political disputes, and it's willing to interrogate them for long hours, for months and months at a time. But at the same time, if you ask most people in China, they will tell you that they feel very free. They feel free to pursue their careers. They feel free to pursue, and increasingly so now that one-child restrictions have been lifted, feel free to pursue their own families and feel free to pursue their own comforts. And there is a great degree of poverty that remains in China. There's something like 600 million people in China who make less than $190 a month. At the same time, if you ask people in China in general, what they'll tell you is that they feel their own lives are getting better, and they feel a great degree of optimism for the country. And I think, understanding that sense of how people in China view China is important as well. China is ambitious. I mean, when it comes to military spending, when it comes to its economic ambitions, when it comes to its desire to take on the US head-to-head in a whole bunch of areas, including sort of fundamental technologies for the modern world. And sometimes that ambition doesn't produce much fruit. It's not clear to me, for example, that China is going to match the US or Western countries in making its own very, very high-end microchips anytime soon. But in other ways, I mean, China's ambitions have had a great track record of success. I mean, in the time I've been here, trains have started rolling from China all the way to Rotterdam, taking containers from here to there in 15 days. When I arrived in China, the smog was suffocating.
When the air is heavy, your lungs feel heavy too.
And one of my first articles in China was about the complexity of solving that problem because of the immensity of the interwoven interests there. Different levels of government, state-owned enterprises, private enterprises, all of these different elements and actors that needed to sort of move in a direction if China was to conquer this issue. And I recall feeling when I got here a sense of that this was going to be very difficult to do. And of course now the air quality is considerably better than it was when I got here. It's worth paying attention to China's ambition. We ignore China at our peril, and we do so for a couple of reasons, but I think one of which is that China has a habit of affecting things far from its borders. And so I think it's important, of course, to pay attention to things like the way Chinese officials overseas, including in Canada, monitor and meddle with Chinese communities in other countries. Those things are all important. But I also think it's really important to pay attention to what's happening inside of China. I mean, the fact that you have large numbers of Uyghur workers who are taken under police escort to work in factories across the country, making products that find their way onto the shelves in Canada. And the campaigns of forcible political indoctrination that took place there, mass incarceration that has taken place there, and subsequent to that, what we've seen with an incredibly rigorous application of fertility policies that have resulted in large numbers of sterilizations and insertions of IUDs and a corresponding very rapid decline in birth rates that's taken place there. It goes far beyond that. It goes into China's politics and the way the Communist Party is exerting and re-exerting itself in everyday life here, and how that influences the way companies operate here, but also how that influences, for example, in the Canadian university context, the kind of partnerships that are still advisable with China. When you understand the degree to which China is making a concerted global effort to sort of bring together technology from other countries that could be useful in a military sense here in China. In Canada and other countries, China can seem, I think, very far away. It can seem very inscrutable, difficult to understand. But my sense is that we ignore China at our peril.